I feel younger generations today and their emotional quotient towards actually understanding problems. They have a lot of information. They have very little knowledge, even less wisdom, and very little emotional quotient.
Hey. I see your point. I see your point.
See, that emotional quotient is largely, is minuscule, right? Also, by virtue of the fact that they're so protected. My friends' kids maybe they have privilege on their side, right? But by and large, that privilege is much more than what we had. And I have only that example to relate to. Plus, I also work with some social development organizations that work with women and girls at the grassroots level, right? Even there, this is not just a urban phenomena or a privileged phenomena. Your emotional quotient has reduced over the years, and I don't know whether they can, whether they'll feel traumatized by it, or whether they'll be able to handle what it means. But I do believe that they can have a very well constructed argument, and I see that 10 years onward. I mean, I'm not an expert, so I really don't know, but I see that they can formulate an argument much better than what I could at that age.
But then, I think of political awakening. I call it that. It sounds very grand. It's really not. But basically, my political awakening, I would say, came around the time of, let's say, I was 19 to 20 years of age. When I say awakening, what I mean is I'm actually comprehending what a government does or how it affects my life and how politics in real life, voting, leads to me being affected. And the only reason why I know all of these things is because I started working in parliament. Right. And that is when I sort of, and journalism before that, but like just generally my awakening sort of happened during that time. When would you say that happened for you?
I'm hoping it'll be next month. Really waiting for it.
Yeah. But I would ask the same question to you. Like, do you remember an age where you actually started to relate these concepts?
I think when I was in class 9. And I think primarily because I was living in Kashmir. Yes. So, everybody was involved in whatever was happening politically. And I won't say it was a very unbiased point of view because you're obviously affected by what you're seeing around you. But at least an awareness of what politics does or its machinations or where politicians stand. A lot of it, you kind of grew up fast in that sense in terms of understanding politics. And it wasn't just true for me. It was true for most people my generation. Maybe because we grew up in really extraordinary times. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, the events of what that were happening around you sort of forced you to think that way. I'm guessing. Yeah.
But having said that, Ram Janmabhoomi or the Babri Masjid demolition happened in 93, right? And I was in class 10, and despite being in Kashmir, I was in 9th or 10th, I'm forgetting the year. We don't remember anybody talking about it.
Interesting. Actually, I don't remember.
And we are a Muslim majority state, right? By and large. But I don't remember anybody talking about it.
I don't remember.
Do you think
either.
you were excluded from these conversations because you were a kid, like at that age?
Not
were
really.
The adults talking in closed rooms?
No, not really. I think, there's a very different, the conversation is very different when you're a minority surrounded by a majority community and when you're a majority. I think you talk about it, you're outraged, but it's not creating a sense of fear. Because you somehow feel that you're living in an area where you are the majority and you'll be protected, right? And maybe perhaps there were other concerns. And I'm going way off track from where this is, but Kashmir was never very communal. I mean, it's a little strange to say that given that there was an exodus and Pandits were... But the conversations were never about Hindu-Muslim. I've met a lot of my friends who happen to be Muslims from outside Jammu and Kashmir. They have a very different perspective to how they look at these issues than me.
That matters a lot as well. Like, I would say then, like, in 2002, for example, because in 93 I was like 4 years old. You were not born.
I wasn't born.
You wasn't born. I was 4 years old. So I'm guessing even if people spoke about it, I don't remember. But in 2002, then, I remember, I don't think anybody really spoke about it much. Political events wise, I think there was 9/11. 9/11 is something that everybody was talking about in 2001. I starkly remember that.
Yeah.
The TV showing that whole thing happening, etc. With an event like 2002, I don't think anything happened. But with 2008, the attacks in Bombay,
Yeah.
I know you have stories about that as well. So that also I remember very starkly. So there are like these events that I remember, which sort of also helped me with that political awakening of sorts, where I'm actually interested in what is happening around the world. Prince falling into a borewell. That was a big event for me as well.
Oh my God, I
that.
can't imagine this. Do you know, it was such a big story for us. So I was at Times Now, right?
Yeah.
And the man who should not be named, right?
Yes.
He was trying to make sure that Times Now becomes the #1 channel and so on. And nothing was working, right? So suddenly the story came of this boy and there were quite a lot of such stories that would come pretty much from our stringers, as they are called, right? Journalists who are all over in smaller towns and whatever. And we had never really looked at them. But he said, we have to make this the biggest story that India is going. Yeah. And we were just blasting that news 24/7.
So you guys caused that ripple effect that made it a...
I think kinda.
I would say Z News did though, because I looked it up and Times Now was there for
Times
sure.
Now, that's what I'm saying, because we weren't that popular.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you talk about Arvind Kejriwal and his rise, we were
Yeah.
a
We were
substantial
up there.
part of that
Right.
process. But the way we went crazy about it, and suddenly it did become a tamasha, right? With all the TV crews there, and the way they carried that news, that I think was a pivotal moment in
Right.
Indian journalism, if you
Right.
want to call it that.
I think that is when
Prince changed it all. He has no idea.
2008 was when I think Times Now actually had its moment, where
yes.
it actually transformed into like a small channel to this channel that everybody seems to be watching. But before we go to that,
Yes.
we'll talk about that later. Go on.
I just have a question.
Chapter.
Chapter
Yes,
related
yes.
question. It was very interesting what you guys were talking about. What's the right age to assimilate ideas?
Yeah.
So, when you were 10, were there any ideas about women that you had internalized, that like you had taken in from the world around you?
Yes. लड़के रोते नहीं है.
हाँ तो सही तो है.
लड़के our toys were different. Like my mom had gotten me, I remember like a mom, mama, all the people had given me a lot of teddy bears. There was a point in my life where all of them disappeared and were replaced with GI Joes. I remember like in
Without telling you, without just like...
that's gone. There is a zoo in Nagpur called Bharas Bagh where I was taken and I was handed over my first GI Joe.
Wow.
And I was given that. I starkly remember this moment because after I went home, the toys were gone and I had this one stupid shit thing to play with. I chota sa aise. I twisted it around and broke it basically immediately. And उसमें एक rubber band था and I was trying to figure out why there is a rubber band inside. So that is one thing that for as women, like I grew up with male cousins mostly. So there were many things which I think I was internalizing just because my family was behaving in a certain way, just because my mom was treated in a certain way, my aunts were treated in a certain way in the family. There's this one very interesting article that I read. Someone had written ki you don't realize the importance of garam roti because since childhood, in a male-dominated household, the woman of the house gives you garam roti, and that just becomes like your habit. So when you go and live alone, you don't have that garam roti and you crib about it, but you do realize that is a sign of patriarchy. Because the women of the house later, they will eat basi roti. They will eat like, अरे अचार लगा के खा लेंगे and this is the best thing that I ever eat. They're just telling themselves that. I think things like that, I would say. Would you say that happened for you as well?
So I think much earlier because, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Just my personal experience, right? So I was what they would call a tomboy. I would always be in shorts and running around and playing with my cousins and my brothers and all of that.
Right.
And every time I had to go out, my mother would want me to wear a frock and, frilly stuff and all that. And I used to hate it. And I started putting, so I remember this one image is so clear in my head. So I'm standing in front of the mirror and she's made me wear this ugly yellow frock, sleeveless. And I take a bar of Dairy Milk chocolate and I put chocolate all over the dress.
Rebel, amazing.
Right? And she saw me and she said, what are you doing? I was like, I don't want to wear this. So then she obviously couldn't do much and she had to allow me to wear shorts. So I knew that I was different, like in the way I was dressed or whatever, but I don't think there was a big deal made by, apart from this going out or whatever, she was fine with me playing with the boys and all of that, right? So maybe that was a realization in terms of different roles. And I also think because my sister was very girly in that sense, right? Always playing with her dolls and quiet and whatever. I think that made the difference even more stark.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I was like this gunda running around and
That Cadbury Dairy Milk, I just had an image in my head, and also it proves one of my theories that all kids are psychopaths. Because it's like, who would do that? Okay, don't, like, who would?
Yeah, if an adult
Like,
does,
it's like, no.
and it looked so deliberate. I don't know what I was thinking.
Did you meet your parents' eyes and you're like,
No, not really.